Ai, e kare mā kua tai rā tātou ki tā tātou pai kōrero tuatahi, tā tātou pai wānanga tuatahi, e mihi ana ki a tātou manuhiri. We have now entered into our first panel discussion, and I want to introduce our manuhiri. Here we have Andrew Crisp, who is the Chief Executive of the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development. We have Lauren James, who is the co-chair, actually, of the organising committee for the National Māori Housing Conference, but also does a lot of other mahi in the space of housing and other areas such as health within the rohe of Te Arawa here. We have Andrew Crisp, who is, kia ora mai. We have Geoff Williams, who is the Rotorua Lakes Council Chief Executive. Tēnā koe, Geoff. And of course we have Willie Te Aho, who is the lawyer, the gardener, the architect and the MSD officer. We're going to discuss the importance of building effective partnerships, and I want to start with you, please, Lauren. These partnerships, who do they involve and why are they so important?
I think Willie hit it on the head. They involve anybody that we need to meet with in order to have the outcomes that we need for our people. If I think about it in the context of Ngāti Whakaue, our partnerships the first formal one actually started back in 1880 when we signed the Rotorua Township Agreement. And so we knew back then the importance of partnership. The other thing that you learn along that way is actually, Māori by nature in terms of partnership, we're in it for the long term. We're not in it for whichever the government is of the time. We're actually in it for generations. And so we have a Rotorua Township Agreement that happened in 1880. The agreement behind that was actually to help establish a township. What you learn along the way in terms of partnership is actually, ngā piki me ngā heke. But key to that is actually always holding to account the people that need to be held accountable for that. Because the reality for us in our Māori environment is we also are held to account. We all have to go home to the marae. We all have to hear our aunties say, "What's going on with the accord, dear?" Or "What are you doing?" So we're all held to account in different ways. But I think the other thing that's important in terms of partnership from a Ngāti Whakaue perspective is nōku tēnei whenua. And that affords us the arrogance of being able to sit in the room and being able to advocate for our people, because our connection to our whenua, our connection to whakapapa requires us to do that. So we will partner with whoever we need to be able to get the outcomes that we need to for our people, because we cannot wait. We are tired of waiting and something needs to happen now.
Geoff, as the Chief Executive of the Rotorua Lakes Council, what's been your experience of how these partnerships work best?
Oh, look, housing partnerships are interesting from a council perspective because councils don't build houses. What they do is sometimes they get in the road of building houses, and that's what we've really learned. The number one learning is actually what Willie talked about. The people that can drive housing outcomes are the people, the hapu, the iwi themselves. Our key role is to actually be there to partner, to assist, and to find out actually how we can help. And we can do that in a number of ways. There's some things that we can bring to the table, such as plan changes, but we can also get other partners, such as Andrew at the end here, also at the table saying, how can we actually get funding here? How can we bring extra resources to the table that actually aren't there? So the key thing from our learning really is that Rotorua has had a crisis. I think we're moving out of it. The reason we're moving out of it is actually the people are leading us out of it. And the government, including the council, is actually there to support that, not actually leading it themselves.
And Willie, you obviously gave a strong kōrero there about the importance of Māori leading kaupapa for themselves and not relying so heavily on these partnerships or on the partner to do the heavy lifting. But you also mentioned the importance of having those relationships in order to gain access to some of the resources to bring those mahi to fruition. So how do you get the balance right in this area?
Yeah, I think I listened to the Minister yesterday and she said by Māori, for Māori. And so for me, In terms of Toitu Tairāwhiti, we're a collective of 4 shareholder iwi and 2 partner iwi. That takes us from Tūranga right around to Te Whakatohea. And for us, it's what was said yesterday and the day before. We have the ability, provide us with the resourcing, and we will deliver in our way. And so for us, it's in our environment, it's by iwi, for iwi. And so that's one critical point. The second point is that in some instances, you don't have the capacity or the expertise. And so we have, in our case, partnered with BuiltSmart from Rahui Pōkeka Huntly. We looked at Conqueror Factory down in Christchurch. We looked at all different models, but they were a family business that we liked the best. They had confidence in us to partner with us to be able to train our people in their system over 7 weeks and then design a facility in Tūranga, because all of us want to employ our people in Aotearoa. And so that was a partnership that saw them using their technology, their brand, to train our people. We paid for the facility, we used their technology in our facility, and that's an example of a partnership. I think it's critical that we also get the language right. People talk about partnership, but what they mean is the analogy between the shark and the kahawai. And the kahawai says to the shark, let's be partners. And the shark goes, I agree, and ate the kahawai. And so what we don't want is to be in environments where we lose who we are to get someone else's outcome. So the languaging is important. 2 examples. When we entered into a partnership with the Crown for housing, it is the only one that's called a kawainata. And that kawainata is important to us. It's also based on te tiriti o Waitangi. And it has rangatira ki te rangatira, which is my leadership throughout Tairāwhiti, and it has ministers. And then it has mahi ki te mahi. And I work at the mahi level. I work at the mahi level with Andrew here, with Kararaina, and with their teams. And so it's important that we get that relationship right. It's not enough to say partnership. We've got to walk and talk what that means.
Andrew, as the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development, are you the shark?
But before I start, mauri ora ki te whare te nei, mauri ora ki te kaupapa. E mihi ana ki ngā pumanawa, e waru o te arawa, tēnā koutou katoa. Can I start with Ricky? Because I think partnerships actually start with relationships. And I just want to acknowledge last night's event. When I started this job 4 years ago, I asked people, who do I speak to? Everybody told me, go speak to Ricky. I spent quite a bit of time up in his part of the world, and as Toddy, thanks Toddy for your great speech, heartfelt speech last night. As you said, he knew where my office was. He used to ring me from my office and say, Andrew, where are you? And sometimes I was out for a run. He said, you go as fast or as slow as you want to, Andrew, I'll be here all afternoon. I share that because we're in this together. I've been doing this job for 4 years. This system's broken. It's been broken, completely broken for Māori. And we've got to put Māori outcomes at the centre of everything that we do. And that's what we're trying to do. And look at my friend Willie here, the work we're doing with Geoff and Lauren. I think it's great examples of us working in partnership. But I think it starts with the system we're trying to shift here is actually about putting people first and place and community first. So I'm just reinforcing everything you're saying, Willie. That's absolutely right. And that's not how our system's been set up. It's a long way away from that. But there are green shoots of change, and that's what we're working on. And I'm proud of that, but I acknowledge that we have a long way to go. But by focusing on people in place, focusing on Māori outcomes to the centre of what we're doing, we will shift this together. And I just want to acknowledge all the mahi of the people in this room today as well, because everyone is doing some pretty phenomenal work in this space. And we all care about what we're trying to do, and we're going to change this because it needs to change.
Do we have the policy settings right to address Māori housing needs?
They are getting a lot better than what they ever were. Absolutely not. There weren't any policy settings in place that were helping Māori 4 or 5 years ago. There's been a whole lot of stuff that's now been put in place. We've got at a strategic level mahi ka ora and how we think about actually the relationship with Māori and how that works. And the important part about mahi ka ora is actually it's your strategy, not mine. Right? Ministers meet with iwi leaders and with Māori, with Te Marapihi every 6 months, and you tell us what matters, and you hold us to account. And that's the shift, and that's one of the big strategic policy things that's changing. We've heard a lot about whai kāinga, whai oranga, and that's, again, early days. But that's a significant policy shift that's been made as well in terms of what's going on. But there's also, we didn't have a progressive home ownership scheme set up for Māori years ago. We haven't done much around affordable rentals. So all these, this is going to sound like bureaucratic language, but all these tools and products weren't in the system. So they're now there. What's critical now is we get systemic change and we embed these things together. And we ensure that these things are embedded, so over time they're sustained. And no matter what government we have, they can work with the system that's actually changing and changed.
Willie?
Yeah, I acknowledge what Andrew has said. We're not going to disrupt the system from inside. We've got to disrupt a system from outside. And so when I look at the people that I'm not currently helping at the moment, they are some of the people that Annette referred to in her kōrero yesterday. The average earnings in Te Whānau Apanui people is 16,500 according to the last census, all right? And so I can help 38,600 and above. To be able to have solutions to help those below the 38,600, the reality is I need to look and be supported to capitalise their accommodation supplement. So what is the government likely to spend on my whānau over the next 15 years? You capitalise that, you give it up the front, and then I can put those people in houses that they will own. And I will put them in there and ensure everything else that I'm doing about job creation, etc., is done at the same time. That's a solution. Those are the types of policy setting solutions that have to be done. I appreciate it's not with Andrew, but those are big picture issues. $3 billion is being spent on per year on accommodation, supplement, emergency housing, transitional housing, all right? So if I'm able to capitalise the accommodation supplement up front for those families, I can see how they're tracking if we don't disrupt that system. And if we get that funding paid up front, then we can put them into housing, we can do all the wraparound services that's going to get them into the employment and all the other wellbeing aspects that are a part of them having certainty in their lives.
And so that's central government funding. And Geoff, what can councils at the council level do to help support that vision?
Yeah, look, I think I've been in local government, central government for a long time, and I think the view that has been there for a long time is that government has all the answers and councils have all the answers. And I think that's what's led us into a situation where the reverse actually was actually true. And what's Willie's point, that we will never get outcomes that we need while we believe that we can solve the problems. And so the primary thing I think that we've made a shift in is to recognise that and to say that the people who can solve the problems here most effectively and successfully are iwi and hapu. They're the ones that need to lead this. So our recognition is, if we say that, how do we get in behind them? And there's no one answer there. There are lots of different things. On one hand, we've recognised that some pieces of land were not zoned correctly, so we've led a plan change. In other situations, we've been told, hey, we've got a problem because our land floods, or our land hasn't got stormwater properly connected to it, or wastewater supply isn't available to us. Can you actually organise for that to happen? And so that's the way that we've been working. So when we talk partnership, I think we have to be careful with that partnership word because it denotes that we're all equal around the table. My view is that we're not. we need to, as from a local government and government perspective, need to recognise that our role is at the table to support, not to lead, not to be a co-partner that is directing how things are going to happen. We need to navigate people to solutions and actually assist. We can't direct people in ways that are actually trying to be counterintuitive to what they're trying to achieve.
Is there a growing acceptance of that view across the council level, across the country, do you think? Because on the issue of Three Waters, we saw some major backlash from the public, parts of the public, and you know, that can be damaging. But for those at the council level, is there an appetite, a growing appetite, to see that kind of that balance of power change?
Look, I definitely think so. In Rotorua now, we've been under a huge level of pressure with homelessness here, and you can't address a problem that big just by simply saying we'll do it through policy settings. We need to bring people together that can make a real and tangible difference, and that's what we've done. We've got Te Arawa very much at the table with us, and actually when we had a meeting yesterday, I heard very clearly that there's some things being put on the table that are very practical, very clear that they need to happen, and we wouldn't have had those insights if they hadn't been there. And I think that's, to be honest, that is happening across the country, and that's part of the Three Waters debate. Who's best to make decisions on the behalf of our communities? Is it an entity that is actually operating over a large area, or is it our communities? And that's the philosophy in behind it.
Now I'm going to go to the audience shortly for questions, so get your pātai ready e te whānau, but quickly I want to come to you, Lauren, just in terms of those partnerships. What's your advice on the best way to strike up a strong relationship?
I kind of want to talk about our situation first. I think when we're wanting to enter into a partnership, it's really important to have your house in order. So, you know, here in, if I use us as an example, here in Rotorua, everybody saw us on the Sunday show. We became extremely infamous because of the Sunday show. And then what happens is we become very reactionary. And we hold meetings all over the place wanting to talk about the Sunday show. But you know what we didn't do is we didn't actually go back and we didn't check on those families. That didn't happen until after the third meeting. So get our house in order first before we want to go out and have these partnerships. Be really clear about why you need these partnerships and be really clear about what you need in terms of these partnerships. So what are your expectations? And then hold your ground and don't move, because you can't afford to move, because once you move and you start leveraging in that space and you start moving in that space, often you end up really at a great point of disadvantage. I think sometimes what we do in terms of iwi Māori is we fail to understand our true value when we're sitting around there. We will often put a value in terms of who is the fund holder, and actually that gives us a master-servant relationship, but actually we are more powerful beyond our own means. The solutions that our communities need sit with us because we have whakapapa in those communities. Those are our families, those are our cousins, those are our mokopuna that are actually in crisis at this moment. So we do have those solutions, but the other thing is to understand that actually they have their solutions too. Many of us sit in really, really privileged positions, you know, because that's the environment that we currently work in. And we say, actually, you must come and talk to us as Māori, because actually we have the answers. But there's also different levels of Māori and different socioeconomic statuses, and we often forget to go and ask their voice and understand their value. So I think my key things will be, let us as Māori make sure we have our house in order. Let us go and partner and be really, really clear about what we're partnering for. And let us make sure that the voice of the whānau that we say that we are here on behalf of is front and centre in terms of every discussion that we're having.
Kia ora. We're going to take questions from the floor now. Mena rānei he pātai tau, tutu mai te ringa. We've got the roving mics from yesterday.
No, not hoodie down.
Is this a mic or a present?
Both.
Ngāti whakao e te whare mihi rā ana moto mahana ki tēnei kaupapa whakahirehira tātou mā e te whare. Huri moana Dennis, te Puia Memorial Marae Tāmaki. Matua, Geoff, I just have a question for yourself and also for you, Whaia Lauren. The council, so far, Matua, we've heard what you can't do. What is it that you can do? Because consenting processes are still sitting with councils. And going fast in Auckland anyway is about 6 to 12 months. That's a real issue for us if we're trying to get ahead, especially in Tāmaki. I welcome your feedback on that in terms of the council role in trying to speed that kaupapa up. For you, Whaia Lauren, in Tāmaki, some of our new developments, Kāinga ora, are actually turning into a real problem. We have families there gathering in these big facilities that are going up 5 stories to the point where they are very, very unsafe. So I welcome your feedback on that if we're talking about relationships and partnerships, because my fear for us in Tāmaki anyway is that we are building the social issues and problems for the next generation. And there doesn't really seem to be any care. There probably is, but all I'm saying is this is what's happening in Tāmaki. Māngere in particular, things are growing up pretty quick. And at the moment, the environment's becoming really, really dangerous and hard to access. More so because some of the whānau that we are putting in there have challenges. We all know that, but they're all going in the same place. So ko tērā te pātai te matua, Geoff, around the consenting processes for the council. We just think it's wrong that we just keep pushing all the stuff to central government, because that is a local government responsibility. Tērā, tērā. Thank you.
Consent.
Kia ora, kia ora. Look, the consenting pathway. So what have we done in Rotorua? It's a very good question. One of the things that we recognised quite some time ago was that our district plan was actually a problem. What it meant was that it actually required people to undertake a resource consenting process for even quite minor developments. We've been lucky enough to actually work with the government to change that. So quite controversially, we've introduced what's known as the medium density residential standards. It actually opens up a lot of opportunities for people to actually build dwellings as of right rather than requiring a resource consent. In other areas, what we've done in sort of around a couple of our projects, we've seen that land is incorrectly zoned. It didn't actually allow people to build houses when they wanted to. So rather than actually put that back to the owners of the land to say, no, you're going to have to do a private plan change, we've taken that responsibility on ourselves. So we have driven the plan change on behalf of the iwi who were wanting to do that work. So what we're trying to do in both of those examples is to actually remove the RMA consenting overhead from the situation, take that completely away. The building consent pipeline is actually a different one. It's actually much more complicated in that we're actually the servants of a system that we're required to oversee. In that area though, what we've done is to try and say, so what's possible here? And what's possible is that if there are standard designs, standard building approaches, we can actually fast track the consent for them. When they're one-off, it makes it more difficult. So those are the sort of things that we've been working on.
When can we expect the removal of the RMA consenting overheads? When can we expect that change to come into action?
Look, that's going to be some time away. I think we're at least looking at a five-year period of time, but we need to be working in front of that to actually understand how can we make this easier, because the system, if you just leave it and operate according to how it works, it is actually hugely tiresome for anyone wanting to undertake development work.
Tēnā tātou, in terms of the pātai that you've asked, Huri Moana, just to say that, like in terms of partnerships, those are unique to each community. I'd never be naive enough to think that I have a solution that could help in your community, a community that I don't actually understand, and nor do I understand the issues that sit in there. The other thing that I have heard here is, in terms of the partnership, is, when we're talking about complex issues, unfortunately they require complex solutions. And intergenerational trauma and the level of issues that many of our people face in some of these very complex communities require, unfortunately, complex solutions. But key to that will always be an alliance and looking at a range of multi-agencies, iwi, sitting around the table and being able to come up with the solutions for themselves. But I'm really honest that I understand my community of Rotorua. I understand the need for partnership in this community and how I can represent Ngāti Whakaue at that table. But never am I naive enough to think that I can provide those solutions for other communities, because those are for those communities to be able to determine for themselves.
And Peter, you wanted to follow up on the issue of resource consents?
Just quickly, kia ora, Huri. If I come back to my earlier comments around people, place and partnership, that's the system shift that needs to happen. So every community, however you define it around place, needs to be joined up as best we can strategically about what we're trying to do in housing. Then what happens, the sort of issues and questions that you're asking, whether it be about consenting or intensification, or whatever it might be, we can work on that together. The housing system hasn't allowed that before. And we've got really good examples starting to play out now. Rotorua is a good example of what's happening here. Hastings is a very good example. We've got Ngāti Kahunu, the council, ourselves, all around the table, holding the council to account around some of the issues you talked about, them holding us to account about some of the stuff that we've been doing. So that's the future we have to get to, all right? And it's got to be community-based, and then, as Lauren says, these individual unique issues that are in each community, we can work on together, and that hasn't been there. And that's the shift that we're trying to make.
Kia ora. Would like to take another question from the floor, please.
Brief statement. First of all, my name is Maru Harepo Pohipi Tapso, and of course I'm part of Ngāti Hira, that's your side there, Willie, and also related to your other side, your wife's side. But anyway, and of course I'm a Tapso, that's the colonising side of me. And anyway, what I wanted to say is that I totally agree with you, but I'd like to summarise this being grow your own. That's your philosophy, and if you grow your own, you will curb back the inflation problem that everybody's facing at the moment. The other point that I want to make to you, central government and local government, is read your history. Read your history and weigh the sins of the crime of the crown. And if you identify the sins of the crown, once upon a time we used to have 66 million acres. That was all taken by decree. What's your answer to all that?
Willie, we're going to throw that one to you.
Yeah, go to the deaf fella.
Grow your own.
Yeah, I guess there's two elements, and I want to jump back on to Huri's question. A famous black poet activist said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." The solution is never in the local government or legislation created by Pākehā. That's the first thing. So what we need to do is, well, what is the alternative? And I understand why people won't comment on his rohe. I will. Hey, we need to be the consenting authority. We need to be the ones that set those regulations for our developments. We need to be the ones that set the multi-proof improvements that MB do, because that's where the delays are. I had to get houses from Whakatane into Tūranga. I had to go to the Whakatane District Council. In terms of houses coming out of Tūrangi and Kirikiri, I wanted a multi-proof approval. I have to go to MB. No one is treating this as an urgency. No one's thinking about those people in motel rooms 32 kilometres away from their houses. Matua, this system doesn't work. So what was my solution to my Gisborne District Council? I'll tell you what, I'm going to build them, I'm going to put them in, and then I'm going to come and work through your system if it works for me. So we had 3 houses go in, no consent. Hey, and that's what my message, grow your own. We need to be the rangatira. Stop waiting for someone to actually give us an answer when we're the mana on our land. So 3 houses went into Uawa, Tekaraka and Wairoa. No consent. They went in and I worked through their process. For me, my people will get into their healthy homes and then I'll work through their bureaucracy separately. Not me, a team that's dedicated, that's user-friendly to work with our council. Okay? From Andrew's team.
Peter, I just want to, apologies, Andrew, come back to the issue of Three Waters, because that, like I said, that received major backlash. How damaging is that from your perspective when trying to foster these relationships and, you know, create space for Māori?
Look, I'm just getting off what I've got to do in my kaupapa. I'm not going to talk about what's going on in Three Waters right now. All I know is that the fundamental key part of my job is to build relationships with Māori, work with people like Willie, make sure I understand what they want and deliver for them. And that's what I'm trying to do. And we've put in place, you know, $800 million in the Whaikai and Whaoranga program. We've got all these other things that are at play now. That's what I'm focused on. And it's not just Whaikai and Whaoranga, it's across the whole system, all right? So I'm also co-chair of the construction sector accord. One of the biggest issues we've got in New Zealand is the productivity of the construction sector, all right? So what have I done there? We've put in place a Māori reference group to ensure they are working solely on how they think about procurement and how they think about building capability in Māori businesses. Nathan's here today. That's the sort of thing that I'm focused on. So that's what I can do with my role, although I absolutely agree there's a lot of other stuff playing out, including Three Waters and things that are going to impact the housing system.
It surely must make your job harder though.
Not necessarily. At the end of the day, we've got to work with the people in the community, their land, their priorities, and what is needed, and we are going as quickly as we can to solve some of these massive endemic issues and trying to change the system. So I'm focused on building homes for whānau in parts of this country that haven't been built for decades. And that's what we're trying to do. I'm not saying it's easy, it's challenging, but we're getting there.
Willie, I think we'll round it up with you.
Oh, look, Three Waters does affect us. It sets regulations in terms of what our water quality should be. And so I was paying for a $2,500 pump to get water into our houses. I'm now paying for $3,500 and more dollars for that pump. You got the pump, you got the UV filter that goes with it. So it does have an impact on us. What we all need to do is make sure that we get the guarantee of that fresh water, potable water to our marae and our Kāinga. And that's what we need to do. How much is that going to cost to get that across the motu? 500 million. That's what it's going to cost. But if there's anything in the Three Waters that we need to champion, is that the right of every one of our marae and our Kāinga getting drinking water as of right. We should be championing that. That's in the Three Waters. There is a cost to us. Who should pay for that cost with new improved UV filters that provide water quality to a higher standard? That cost has got to go somewhere. That does impact on us. So we've got to be a part, unfortunately, of every show in town, and it does exhaust us. But it just means we've got to spread ourselves and make sure we're on the pulse of everything that's happening. But we also need to make sure we're not a part of panels that are actually underselling what our aspirations of our people are. We've got a right to clean drinking water. We don't have that in Gisborne at the moment. We've got to boil our water because the old infrastructure broke down, and now you drive into Tūranga and you get signs. Water conservation. Don't drink the water, boil it. This is in a city of 30,000 people. There are critical issues that impact on us. We've got to be over all of them if we're in the housing space. That's just the reality.
We have one final pātai from the floor, and then we're going to wrap it up e te whānau.
Kia ora tātou, huri au no te raroa, mai kai taia, tēnā koutou. He pātai mā koutou. As an engineer, I'm embarrassed that our engineering profession has failed us for the past 200 years. Our infrastructure has failed us. How do you see that we can improve Māori being at the table of what the engineering solutions that suit our communities, whether it be for central government or local government, regardless of whether it's Three Waters or whatever other program they propose. How do we get us involved in the land use planning and infrastructure planning? Kia ora.
I'll give it a go. It's resourcing, brother. When I go to the Uenuku Kōpako Papa Kāinga for 15 houses, I ask the questions around infrastructure, to put the eroding in and their footpaths, etc., and all the infrastructure in. That's 2 million. Okay? So I can then calculate that out and say what it costs to put infrastructure into Uenuku Kōpako and their 15 houses. On average in Tairawhiti, it's 115,000. So that's your water, your power, your septic, etc. It's resourcing. When you've got the resourcing, you can do things. And the main mantra from day one of this conference has been, give us the resourcing, get out of the way, and we'll get the mahi done. We can address it if we have the resourcing. Sorry.
In short, speak to Nathan. So Māori, as I said, are sitting at the table around the construction sector accord. That's the way we're trying to shift the performance of the construction sector in the economy. He's doing a lot of work in the space. He's here.
Kia ora. Ka pai ka waihoake a tātou kōrero ki konei e te whānau Andrew Crisp, Lauren James, Geoff Williams and Willie te aho. Tēnā rā koutou katoa e mihi ana.